The Tribal Health and Human Services Department of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes is proud to present Good Medicine, a program dedicated to the wellness of the Flathead Nation. The mission is summarized quite simply: a healthier people, a stronger nation. We'll strive to make Good Medicine a reliable source of ideas and information about health issues so that everyone can make informed decisions about their own lifestyle and health care. You'll meet health professionals, tribal government and spiritual leaders, and interesting people from the tribal community discussing important health issues that profoundly affect us all.
Good afternoon, I'm Roxana Colman-Herak with the Good Medicine Show. Today we have a very interesting group of people with us, and we're going to be talking a little bit about post-trauma stress disorder. I'd like to introduce Paul Jeffries, Wilbert Michel, two local boys, and Roger Shourds. Roger. And what I'd like to do is maybe just keep this open today and have you tell me a little bit about what's been happening out there as far as post-trauma stress disorder. How did you three get together, and where are you going with post-trauma stress disorders? Wilbert?
How we got to meet Paul was, for me, was really by accident. Anyway, I went out to Blue Bay for elders and youth circle. And that's where I was introduced to Paul Jeffries, who really struck me in a good, positive way. The way he made the comment that we could talk, and get nothing done. What we need is action. And I was very pleased to meet Paul.
Okay. Paul, tell us a little bit about you. What is it? I know that Roger and Wilbert both have talked about some work that you're doing with post-trauma stress disorder. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's based on the work of Ed Tick in a book called War in the Soul. And it works with war and post-traumatic stress disorder from a mythological perspective, the use of old stories and ceremony based on a circle and speaking from the heart. And I was introduced to this a couple of years ago when I was asked to attend a conference in Albany, New York, and we started a circle in our community. And when I came here, because the work is based on the use of a Native American circle and a sacred fire, I wanted to authenticate more of what we're doing, because we're borrowing from a culture without permission. And so I came here hoping to meet veterans who were using somewhat similar processes to heal themselves. And what I found were veterans in need of healing. And so I met Roger first, and we got to talking about his story, and he asked if I could help Wilbert. And I had not met Wilbert yet. And that afternoon I got to meet Wilbert and met two individuals who had kept 40 years of war inside of them, which I'd seen many times in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So when I got home, I sent them copies of the book and asked them to read it. And as they did, they expressed a desire to know more about it. So I invited them to come to Akron.
Is that where you're from, is Akron?
Akron, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Because it turned out in November, we had Ed Tick there for a workshop, and we're going to spend a weekend with veterans introducing them to this process. So Roger and Wilbert came and stayed in our home and got to experience it firsthand.
What was that experience like for you, Roger?
Well, at first it was apprehensive because the first place they took us was Kent State University, and anybody that's familiar with the Vietnam War knows that that's where the National Guard shot and killed students protesting the war. So after the first day at the Kent State, Wilbert and myself and Paul, Judy, and we all went to the memorial for those students and prayed. And it was a pretty heavy session. The next part, we participated in a talking circle, and Wilbert and me, our tribe here doesn't use a talking stick, but we appreciate the ceremony and the sincerity of it. Well, what helped us bring it out was that we listened to a 23-year-old Marine Corps sergeant who just came from Iraq, and I didn't realize that his father was sitting beside me, and he started talking about that he has the trauma that he had to shoot a kid that was going to shoot a rocket-propelled grenade at him, and he couldn't get the face out of his mind. And he physically and mentally was breaking down when he's talking. So then Wilbur took the stick and talked, and then I did, and we brought out stuff that we've been carrying for 42 years.
From the war.
From the war, from the Vietnam War. So it helped us heal, and we met other people who were walking around with the same mental sickness that we've had, and we were kind of we didn't even get welcome home like the Iraqi and Afghanistan people did. Myself, I was spit on in the San Francisco airport and called a baby killer, and the same old story over and over that you hear.
It had to be tough.
And I decided to go back. Wilber's asked me, privately, what were you crazy? You just got out of the war and you went back. But it kind of went back because I knew what was going down in Vietnam, and I couldn't deal with, like, they were protesting in Missoula, protesting the Vietnam War, carrying the North Vietnamese Army flag down down Higgins Avenue. So I went back. Like I told him there, I went to Vietnam in May of '66 with 87 people, and by February '68, there were only 2 of us left. So Wilbur has his own story, but what has happened in the past, in my own personal opinion, is that people like Wilbur and myself didn't talk to each other. You go through a denial thing that nothing's wrong with me, I'm okay. But not realizing that something is wrong with you, and you need to talk about it. So I learned there to talk about it and not carry it around anymore. I'm personally diagnosed by the government, the VA. They rated me 160% disabled.
I didn't know you could go above 100%.
I didn't either until they sent me my letter. But, with post-traumatic stress and physical injuries from Vietnam.
So do you think that the post-trauma stress disorders that we're seeing around the country, is that something that we need to be looking at and maybe taking a different approach on in our own community? We have a lot of vets that are coming back. One of the things that's important to note is the national hotline. I think 3 out of 5 calls that go into the national hotline right now are suicide related, and it's post-trauma stress disorders that seem to be a real concern. So you're wanting to do maybe some support groups in our community for post-trauma stress disorder? Is that where you're all?
Well, Wilbur and myself met with the college, and Tracy McDonald had just come from a workshop, PTSD workshop in Helena. So she was already starting a group, and we came in and gave her the book, and she has now asked us to participate and teach the other veterans how to talk. The group won't be, it's not a counseling session, it's veterans listening to other veterans and veterans' families, and we can identify support in the community, but we're not proclaiming to be counselors or trained counselors. They're finding, with Dr. Tick and Paul's been involved in it, that a veteran's more likely to talk to another veteran. See, we went, the way they taught us there, we went outside of the circle to fight. Now we need to come back into the tribal circle or into the whatever circle, your living circle, and quit fighting, because it doesn't go away. The history on it with the military and the VA, the Vietnam veterans had to sue the government in the 70s, and it came about in 1979, 1980 that the diagnostic manual finally recognized post-traumatic stress as a mental disorder. Before that is shell shock, stress, whatever, and we're not saying there's not other post-traumatic stress related to other issues, but we're going to attempt to deal with veterans who are coming from a war, because we went with the council and we both recognize there's a 20% suicide rate for Iraqi, Afghanistan people, because they're serving 2 to 3 tours, maybe more. And now they have a whole other issue, is dealing with women who are now in combat, and their suicide rate is even higher than males. Because they're like the life givers, the people who raise children, have children, and they've been required to kill somebody. And they can't, females are having a harder time dealing with it, to come back to be, now they want them to be a mother again, if they had children, but how do you deal with that after you've killed somebody?
That sounds like a really tough, almost an impossible challenge. I mean, without some type of support or some intervention or some help, I think it would be a never-ending battle. So I'm glad to hear about that. I'd like to, Wilbert, tell us a little bit about what you'd like to see. And
What I'd like to see happen is not only for the veterans, but for the veterans' family, the wives, their kids, the mothers, the grandmothers, aunts, uncles, dads. I'd like to see them participate also, because they also carry a big load, worrying about their loved one who is off in a foreign country fighting. And I think that's very important, to bring the whole family into this circle. It would not only help the whole community, it would definitely help that family that's involved, the one that's off to a conflict and coming back, and having the parent realizing that their son is a different man when he gets home. And they could share that by coming to these group meetings. And what I'd like to see the approach done would be by the Native American, the way of the circle. Trust, and just being there for the person who comes home, gets off the plane, and seeing his family there. When I came home, there wasn't anybody, you know. There was no welcoming committee. When I got off at Fort Lewis, Washington, I went through the same process as Roger did. It was I was actually ashamed of what I did once I got back to Fort Lewis, Washington. They send you to a what do you call it?
Debriefing.
Debriefing, which really doesn't amount to much. They say, well, you're back safe now. Go ahead and go home and pick up where you left off. And that's hard to do. And with the support of even a few people, it would help that veteran. You know, it would really welcome him home for something that he didn't realize what he was getting into. It's all fun and games at the beginning, but once you step across that line, everything is on the line for either side, your life, their life. And that also means the life of your loved ones on both sides, no matter what country you are up against.
I think that's going to be really important and helpful in our community, because I know that there's families of vets that probably feel pretty disconnected. There's not a lot of services. In fact, the Veterans Administration is now recognizing the need to really provide more services to vets, and particularly the post-trauma stress disorder and how that's impacting the families. Domestic violence, those types of things are on the rise. And there's a lot of adjustments and a lot of work that we need to be doing in our community, so I'm glad to see something like this happening. Before we go into a commercial break, I'd like to ask Paul, how did you kind of get involved? I mean, what kind of was the passion that drove you to bring this out into our communities to help us get reintegrated into our values, our traditions, and our circles?
It's been a lifelong pursuit of mine to learn more about Earth-centered traditions. And then I've been working with a friend of mine with urban youth and the use of mythology in their healing. And a chaplain, Vietnam chaplain friend of mine, gave me this book and asked me to attend this conference in Albany. And after seeing the similarity in the process and the use of the Native American circle as a ceremony, you can't sit in a room and listen to veterans tell their story and not want to do something. And I recognize that the massive amount of resources are required and the limited amount of resources that are going to be available, realistically, that this is a process that requires very little in the way of financial resources and can involve an entire community in the healing. I mean, these warriors leave their communities to defend their families and their country, and they see and they do things that change who they are. And when they come back, the community has an obligation to be involved in that healing, and this is a way it can be done.
It sounds like there's a lot of wounded souls out there. I keep hearing that word come out. Wounded souls, open wounds. And until those wounds are healed, I think we're going to continue to suffer and to feel like there's no support systems in place to deal with that. And certainly with the number of mental health services that are available, it's like that's not really, I think, where people want to go. I think they want to be reconnected with community.
And as a community, if we don't reconnect them, we need to keep in mind that what happened after Vietnam, we're still paying a toll. And this is an urban war. So the men and women who come back here damaged, if we're not helping them, they're trained in urban warfare, and we're already seeing in major cities the result of that. So
I think that's going to bring us, we're going to have another session after this to talk about some of those things that are happening in urban communities that are making a difference in troubled youth's lives. In our own community, we certainly have troubled youth. We have youth that are kind of lost, kind of disconnected from tradition, from the cultural values. And there seems to be a tinge of rebellion out there. What do you think that's?
Well, one thing is that traditionally in the tribes, the warriors went to battle and then they would come back and they'd have a ceremony. The Northern Cheyennes just had one for one of their returning veterans, and they would heal you. Then when the elder warriors, or the warriors who had already been to battle, would then teach the young boys to be warriors. But if we're wandering around sick, and we don't want to, one of the symptoms is you don't want to be around anybody. You don't want to interact, take your responsibility as a warrior for teaching the youth. So Vernon Finley was talking at Blue Bay that 70–80% of the girls are going to school or college after high school, but the young males are just, Wilbert and myself are talking, they're wandering around, they're lost. Nobody's taking them like, I'm an elder warrior, I'll teach you the warrior way. Not so much to go fight and kill, but this is your responsibility to the tribe. And they'll only learn from us. It's not written in a book. But if all your warriors are sick from battle and they never got, Dr. Tick talks it in his book that you lost your soul. That it was so traumatized and killing and all this violence that he's had people talk about they felt their soul actually leaving. How do you get it back? And how do I come home and teach these youth? Like I told the council, I'm tired of going to funerals and looking at young people laying in a coffin. Look at how many suicides we had right before we went, 3 or 4 in 1 week. In their 20s, they're not even going to war. They have their own war here. And Wilbert's a leader of the Kootenays, and I'm a warrior from this end, and we need to do something. Whether this is the answer or other programs the answer, we need to stand up and do something. We can't wring our hands and say how terrible it is and go say rosaries and prayers at a funeral. It's time to make it stop. The best, because in that article in the Charcusta, they talked to Vietnam veterans. Over, 200,000 or so lost their life to suicide or alcohol, murder, violent crimes, and only 58,000 died in the war, but 4 times more lost their life after the war. So are we creating another, I mean, there's a lot more people serving in this war going back and forth all the time. So how's that gonna, it ties, I believe, directly into our youth. If all these people are coming home and they're sick, like I just said, who is a young male gonna turn to?
I think prevention in our communities is going to be a word we're going to be exploring a lot and really taking a more proactive approach. There are things that we can be doing, and I'm glad that the 2 of you have stepped up. This is a big problem. It can't be done single-handedly. It can't be done with 1 or 2 people. It does take a whole community before a community can heal. But the community needs to recognize how significant those wounds are in the community and how divided and how separated and disconnected that can leave a community feeling if you don't have people that are willing to come forward. A little bit more from Paul. How was your journey here from Ohio? How does the weather compare there to here?
We've got over a foot of snow, but it's not as cold. In fact, today I think it was supposed to be like 60 degrees. So our weather is controlled by the Great Lakes. Yours is the mountains. So this is beautiful.
Now, do you have, we're talking about our community right now, but do you see this problem is this a universal problem that's emerging, or?
I think it's a universal problem of warriors from the beginning of time. We live in a culture that's defined war by John Wayne. And the realities are so different. And in my limited experience, Native American culture has always dealt with this in a positive, effective way by recognizing that being a warrior, life is the last thing you sacrifice, and that this is about protecting life and family and community, and that in the old ways, this recognition began with the return home and an immediate isolation of the warrior by the community in the healing process, where they unburdened the warrior by listening to the stories and bringing their own experiences directly to the warrior in the healing process so that they bring them in. And PTSD to me is what happens when you ignore it. When we don't want to know what goes on. If we want to have any chance of stopping war, then we need the entire community to understand what war does to a human being. And maybe we won't send our children there in the future.
You know, one of the things that I read here recently and some reviews on War and the Soul Here's a review that I read. Like no other terror on earth, war is so traumatic that indeed one soul may be lost forever. And I think this should probably be our cue and our wake-up call that our souls are wounded. Post-trauma stress disorder is huge. It's consuming our communities. It's consuming our young people that are going to wars. So I'm absolutely committed, and I hope we can get a lot of commitments from the community to help you in the direction that you want to go. I know the college is having some support groups. When do they have those? Is it veteran support groups at the colleges?
They haven't set it up yet. They're setting up the place in the late Louis Kai building. We're gonna. She was talking about holding it on Tuesdays from 2 to 4. And
Tuesdays from 2 to 4 on the college campus here?
right,
And that's going to be where at? What building?
Louis Kai
Louis
building.
Kai, okay.
And we'll put it out in the paper and maybe come back to you when it's formalized.
Okay. In the meantime, if people had questions wanting to know more about what's going to be coming up in the community, how can they get a hold of you?
I have my phone numbers in the article, 883-1557, or my cell phone's 871-3520.
Okay, good. Wilbert?
My phone number is 871-8988, and I'm available 24/7 if necessary.
I've heard you both say that, and I think that's really, that's wonderful and that's noble. You know, it reminds me of another thing that I read not too long ago, and it was talking about warriors, and it kind of stuck in my mind, and it was saying, a warrior is not measured by the battles he fight, but a real warrior is one that's not afraid to expose its vulnerability. And that's where we're vulnerable. We're all vulnerable, and not being afraid to show that vulnerability, I think, is going to be part of the healing process. So it looks like we're getting ready for a wrap-up of the show. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or we have about a minute?
Wow.
What can you do in a minute?
Yeah, what can you do in a minute? Encourage veterans to risk it, sit down and meet other veterans, listen to their stories, reach out and help the young ones. I mean, even if you're a veteran who feels that you've adjusted, adapted, absorbed this, whatever, these young ones coming home, there's no reason for them to have carried this burden for as long as Roger and Wilbert did, and so many of the men from our generation have.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's the end of our show, so I'd like to thank you, Paul, Wilbert, and Roger for joining us today on Good Medicine.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Good Medicine is your program. We hope you watch this and subsequent programs to stay informed about your health care. And we'd like to hear from you about how we're doing. Please direct any comments or suggestions you have to us. You can reach us at